Ok, buenos días a todos. Lo siento, mi español es muy malo, so I will speak in English. I think it's better for everyone. Muchas gracias. Thank you to Rodrigo, Francisco, Tonali, and everyone at CMMAS for putting together such a great event once again. Those of you at last year's Visiones Sonoras may remember me talking about my project following the flight of the Monarchs, and I'm going to be giving you a bit of an update on that project, which includes a residency that I had here at CMMAS earlier in the year with Mexican dancer Patricia Solorzano. So following the flight of the Monarchs is an interdisciplinary acoustic ecology project which brings together artists, scientists, ecosystems and communities across the monarch butterfly migration routes between Mexico and Canada every year. This incredible multi-generational migration which occurs 4 generations a year, starting in Texas and moving up to Canada. And then it's generation 4, which makes that incredible journey over 3,000 miles in just 6 weeks from Canada all the way down to Mexico, including, obviously, Michoacán. They're really an incredible species and very beautiful, I think you would also agree. So my journey with monarch butterflies began in 2015 when I visited CMMAS and also visited the El Rosario Reserve. And as a sound artist, I was really fascinated by the fact that when the monarch butterflies overwinter and they swarm in millions, you can actually hear this beautiful, delicate rustling sound of their wings. And I was just so keen to capture that. And I was able to go out with Jose Luis, who was working at CMMAS at the time, who sort of helped me communicate with the guides at El Rosario. And I was able to film and record this wonderful sound of their wings. And it was during that trip that I also met composer and media artist Jessica Rodriguez, who was working at CMMAS at the time and who is now just completed a PhD at McMaster University, migrating herself to Canada. And I also collaborated with Rolando Rodriguez and commissioned him to write a poem in Spanish about this migration of the monarchs and the scientific knowledge that we have of their migration, but told from a very emotive perspective. So I put together an installation which is a wooden structure resembling a hide in the forest that you might look out at the butterflies from, with 4 video screens and 4 loudspeakers surrounding the participant as you walk inside the installation. And the sound has 3 layers. One is the sound of the environment itself, with the rustling sound of millions of monarch butterfly wings. One is the poem from Rolando Rodriguez, and another is a musical layer, which is based on an improvisation between myself on flute and American musician David Blink playing handpan. And we ended up touring the installation in various places. These were a few locations in the UK, including the Eden Project at the top there. And I think my favourite iteration of it was at the Shambhala Festival in the UK, where we presented the hide outside. So you're walking in the English woodlands, and then you walk inside this hide, and you're kind of teleported to Mexico to be surrounded by these beautiful monarch butterflies. So these are all the people who are involved with the creation of that installation, and some of the other presentations that we gave of it, including a kind of a film version of it, sort of documentation. But it was really through that first engagement with the monarch butterflies that, doing some more research, I became increasingly aware of the environmental threats that they face and that they are very much an indicator species of. And their numbers, as I'm sure everyone in the room knows, have decreased by nearly 90% over just the past 2 decades in such a short frame of time. And there's really 3 main sort of aspects to that. One is industrial use of herbicides and pesticides, particularly prevalent in the Corn Belt in the US. Also deforestation, a particular issue in the forest tops in Mexico, where the butterflies only roost above 10,000 feet. So their whole population is squashed into very small areas, which are very sort of delicate in that sense. And also, like everything else, climate change is affecting them. When I was talking to the late Lincoln Brower, monarch butterfly expert, he described walking through 2 foot deep of monarch butterfly bodies after a freak storm caused by climate change. So really over the past 10 years or more, my work has become increasingly interdisciplinary, and I've become much more interested in the area of soundscape ecology and ecoacoustics. I was particularly inspired by the work of Bernie Krause, reading his book, The Great Animal Orchestra, and he works a lot with Canadian ecologist Brian Pijanowski, and this is an article that they produced or published in Bioscience, Soundscape Ecology, the Science of Sound in the Landscape, and really the power of sound to give us information about the health of an ecosystem, particularly when you look at the soundscape holistically, rather than just focusing in on 1 or 2 different species, but looking at the relationship between all of them. And Bernie Krause, starting his career as a musician, and then ending up doing a PhD in bioacoustics, and then working for the Forestry Commission, has come up with this acoustic niche hypothesis, whereby we can see this sonogram of Camp Leakey in Borneo, with different species communicating across narrow bandwidths of frequencies which don't overlap with each other. And see, he said this is where the great animal orchestra idea comes from. It's a bit like looking at a musical score with each instrument in an arrangement in its own sort of pocket. And similarly, in each biome that he has sort of traveled to around the world over 50 years, it seemed very obvious that each of these different species had found their own acoustic niche within the soundscape. And a really sort of powerful example, I think, of giving us a sense of the health of an environment by listening as opposed to looking is in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California in 1988, when Bernie Krause was working for the Forestry Commission, and this is an area where they were doing selective logging, so sort of chopping down 1 or 2 trees here, and the idea is to minimize the impact. And he went there 6 months before logging and took a photograph and a field recording. Then he went there 6 months after logging, again took a photograph and a field recording. The photographs looked almost identical. Just to look at the forest, you couldn't really tell that there'd been much depletion. Sound, on the other hand, told a really different story. So this is the area 6 months before logging. You can see lots of activity there. And then this is 6 months after logging. And this is actually just the sound of a lone woodpecker. And he'd sort of visited at least 15 times over the last 30 years, and it still hasn't fully recovered. And sound, as I was saying, is being increasingly used in the area of ecoacoustics to monitor environmental change over time and looking at the relationship between different species and monitoring biodiversity and ecosystem dynamics. Most of that has been done using long-term recorders, which you'll sort of leave out in the field, maybe strap it to a tree and leave it for a year and then come back, and then you've got this big data to work with. However, over the last about 10 years ago, I met Grant Smith from Sound Camp in the UK, who specialise in high-quality live streaming of soundscapes. And they collaborate also with the Locus Sonus project in France, run by the art school there in Aix-en-Provence, and in collaboration with the University of Marseille. And they have an online sound map, which is open source. Anyone can live stream from it. And it's basically a living sound map where you click on each pin and you're listening to that location in real time. You're kind of transported to that place. And I wondered if it would be an interesting idea to try and create a network of these open microphones across the monarch migration routes so that anyone in the world can listen into those. We can show those with scientists anywhere in the world and start to use them for ecosystem monitoring, but also integrating into creative artworks, installations, and musical performances. So in 2018, I came out and went to the Cerro Pelon Reserve near Zitácuaro, and we also worked with a team called Butterflies and Their People Arborists, and this is a scheme which gives local people paid work for being stewards of the forests. In fact, one of these guys used to be a logger, and now is being paid for being a guardian of the forest. Also, when I was talking to, so obviously we can use those live streams to listen into the different bird species. Those are, as well as the monarch migration routes, as well as being monarch migration routes, are also major bird migration routes. If the monarchs are being affected, what other species are being affected? We can listen into the bird song and see what's happening with them. But also, I talked to you about this sound of the monarch butterfly wings, and that is very much, their activity is very much linked to the temperature and humidity of the environment, which is changing very much as well. And it's the sort of critical parameters between which they can exist. So the monarchs are highly temperature sensitive, and they need to have direct sunlight in order to warm their bodies up enough to fly. And then they need to do that to be able to drink water and dew. And if they don't get enough sunlight, then they won't be able to fly and feed, and therefore they'll die. So I wondered if we could use some form of machine listening to listen out for that sound of the butterflies if we're able to get a stream box in a location nearby. And this is actually the site that came to us when the first day at the Cerro Pelon Reserve, and that was a sound field microphone, which is an ambisonic mic picking up the sounds in all directions in kind of 3D. And similar to the Sierra Nevada example, this is what that meadow, the llano, sounds like without the butterflies there. Whoops, try that again. Yeah. And this is what it sounds like when they are there. So hopefully you get that delicate rustling and a few bees as well. That was a butterfly actually flying into the microphone itself. And this is what the Locus Sonus sound map looks like, and each of those pins is, like I say, a kind of living soundscape. Anyone can use this. It's completely open source. There's even an app that turns your mobile phone into a temporary streaming device. You could use a laptop. What we've been using is Raspberry Pi computers in a weatherproof housing, and then in the case of Cerro Pelon, it's using a solar-powered setup for power and also a 3G mobile phone network. So this is Franco Ramirez, who was helping us on the project, and we went up on horseback to lift these very heavy solar batteries. That's our elated faces when we finally managed to find a location that had enough 3G signal to broadcast from as well. And this is what the box looks like. So the box is at the bottom with the lid off. You might be able to see those two microphones, the furry bits on each side there, with omnidirectional. So the box acts a little bit like a dummy head. So when you listen with headphones, it gives you a kind of 3D image of what it's like to be on the side of the mountain. Then the box at the top has got the solar battery in, and then to the right you can see the router, which is using the 3G signal. That's us testing the signal. That was it on the map. We played a kind of inaugural performance on the top of the mountain once we got the Streambox working. That's what it looks like on the side with the solar power. That was the view. And these are all the bird species that ornithologists at UNAM, on the Morelia campus of UNAM, were able to identify from this short clip. Well, it's about 2 minutes in total. I won't play the whole thing now, but just to give you a sense. So as well as the kind of eco-acoustic angle, we've also been going out into the reserves and playing musical performances amongst the butterflies. The idea is to have a kind of human, non-human interaction through improvisation with the environment, feeling the wind on our faces, listening to the birds, watching the movement of the butterflies, etc. So this is David Blink playing handpan amongst the butterflies in the morning as they're coming down and drinking that morning dew. We were on that same trip later joined by Rolando Rodriguez, who recited poetry. On the top left there was actually up in near the roosts reciting the poetry. And this is another performance, as well as kind of interacting with these other species in the soundscape. The acoustic of the space itself was really interesting. So this is a recording of David playing trumpet and myself playing flute. You can hear this incredible reverb. So yeah, there's not been any digital processing on that. That's what that space sounds like. So I installed that first box, or we as the team installed that first box in 2018 in Cerro Pelon in Mexico. Then in 2019, I went to Point Pelee National Park in Canada, to the other end of the migration, and installed a box there, which is at the Visitors Centre. And then earlier this year, I had 3 weeks in Mexico, including a week-long residency with Patti Sorozano at CMMAS, where we developed a new dance piece together. But then I also went to Texas, where she now lives, in Houston, and we visited Phil Hardberger Park in San Antonio, and we've been able to install another box there. So it's just on the side of the building, rather than it being a 3G solar-powered setup, we're just using a single Ethernet cable and sending power over that. So it's much easier to work with. But the idea is to have this network of stream boxes which are live streaming these. So we've actually got the Canada one, Texas, Mexico, and we're collaborating also with Jasper Ridge Biosphere Preserve and Trevor Herbert there, who works, that's part of Stanford University, and they already have a stream box there as part of a sort of multi kind of instruments array that are monitoring the park. And I also have a stream box in Virginia, which we're still looking for the right location for, but we're working with a sound artist, Vaughan Garland, there. And another part of the project here, if we get enough funding, the idea is to kind of record the databases and work with a team who can use AI to identify all of the birds on that. But we also, a big part of the project is around community making and joining up communities of people along the migration routes, so they can listen. We can almost have listening parties where we're listening in to where the monarch butterflies are, maybe working with an ornithologist at that time. But also people could use apps like Cornell University's Merlin and record from the streams and then upload that data to apps like iNaturalist, which form a sort of citizen science database of bird species that they've been able to hear. So again, we can start to build a bit of a database through the citizen science angle as well. I made a radio program for the project called Flight of the Monarch for BBC Radio 3. It's 30 minutes long. You can get it on BBC Sounds. And again, best to listen on headphones because you get that binaural effect, especially because some of the recordings are also ambisonic, but there's a binaural decode. But it's, as you can tell, this is sort of a project which has been going for several years, and it's quite organic in the way that different people and communities have become involved with it. And during lockdown, we created a series of telematic online performances where we used the live streams from Canada and Mexico so that we played on top of those. I would be, in this case, I'm there in Leeds playing my flute. And then we have David Blink in California playing handpan, percussion and trumpet, Rolando reciting poetry, and then on the video we can see is actually being mixed in real time by Jessica Rodriguez in McMaster University using a piece of software called Estuary, which is developed at McMaster University for live streaming. And we weave together our live performances and the live streams from the locations against previous field recordings and recordings of ourselves. So these sort of multiple spatialities and temporalities being mixed together. And we're very much inspired by Teresa Connor's idea of ecological performativity, a non-anthropocentric model characterized as a dance of agency between living and non-living systems, human and non-human actors, and the complexity within which they are entangled. And so that model stems from the premise that artistic practice enables different perspectives of the world and becomes an apparatus for change, promoting what we consider a long overdue shift in the way we exist in the world. So changing things by doing, by connecting. And this idea of sort of telephenomenology. People can be anywhere in the world, but by listening and engaging to these places that may be thousands of miles away, there's a sense of place and connectedness, hopefully, that can be engendered through that process. So that's where we sort of all are in our combinations. And so back about 2 years ago, since we had quite a lot of online videos of those performances, I was contacted by Patti Solorzano, and she also had been working with monarch butterflies for several years on her project Danzas Migratorias. And her work is very much inspired or informed by keen observation of the butterflies and the way that they move, but also by reading scientific papers and understanding how they respond to light and heat and humidity. And so she tries to embody the butterfly. What is it like to be a monarch butterfly? She's been doing a series of outdoor performances and also created these beautiful costumes that you see here. So last year, the team of us went out, Patty and two other dancers, myself and David, and we did some more performances in the reserves. We also moved the Streambox to a new location. You can see us there. And we did a performance here at CMMAS. And then earlier this year, we came to CMMAS to work on a dance piece that would be suitable for a concert setting, which incorporates video. And actually, she's getting me to dance and move as I play the flute. And that was informed by some improvisations that we produced between ourselves, actually in the reserve. So this is actually on an ejido near to the Sierra Cinque Reserve. And this is a single microphone and single camera shot. We won't play the whole thing, but I'll scroll through. And this is of Patty and myself improvising, observing and responding to what we see and hear. Further away, and you can hear more and more of that wonderful acoustic again in that space. This is one of my favourite bits. If you look really closely, in a second you might see a monarch butterfly flying sort of past me in the distance, and it flies right towards the camera. There we go. It's in the background there. See it right in front. And very quickly, I wasn't able to get this into my PowerPoint, but where is it? Bring this up. This is just a short clip of a work in progress that we performed in this space. So this is a sort of version of what we're going to be performing tonight, and this is based on a poem by Patty herself, who has also migrated along the monarch butterfly migration routes throughout her life, which is actually a very, very common thing. But unfortunately, Patty isn't able to join us, but instead we are going to do a performance where we're going to live stream the video from Patty, and this is just a screenshot from a performance that we gave earlier in the year, which I think at least one person in the audience here was at. Right at the back. For this performance, I'm kind of doing everything live with the flute and the field recordings, etc., and some live streams from the sound map. But for this performance, Patty was in Mexico and I was in Portugal, and we live streamed her video using OBS and overlaid that over footage from the Monarch Butterfly Reserves, which was edited together by Jessica Rodriguez. But I think I'm out of time, so thank you very much for listening, and hopefully with Team Monarcha we can make a difference. Thank you.
¿Hay alguna pregunta?